So if you were sharing with a friend about Jesus and you were dialoguing with them, maybe they just don't know a whole lot about the Bible or much about Jesus, but not much of a church background or familiarity with the truth, and you were trying to convince them that Jesus was greater than anything in their life that they valued or anyone that they thought was to be admired, revered, and held in high esteem or high regard. What kind of a person would you expect, or what kind of a thing would you expect they would put up as in discussion with you as evidence of something that they revered or looked up to? Can you think of a person they would say, like, man, of all people in the world I've ever heard of, this is the person right up at the top of the list I would think would be the greatest of all? What people do you think they'd throw out there? Some in a religious world, perhaps someone like that, Mother Teresa, for all of the laudable things that were accomplished in her understanding and the name of God. Lots of people in lots of different needy areas of the globe helped. So maybe someone like that. Can you think of anybody else that they might put up as someone who is held in very high esteem and high regard? What's that? Maybe Gandhi. India's Gandhi, for his laudable works as well, demonstrating nonviolent, peaceful response to opposition, persecution, modeling a way. Okay, there's another name. Mother Teresa, Gandhi. Any other names you can think of that maybe to be out there? Quite a few, I guess. Quite a few. What about here in the States? Can you think of anybody who would go into our own history and maybe put up the name of someone who just would stand out? I asked this to kids once, and they had the one name that came up more than any other. It's interesting. Students in school, Abraham Lincoln was a name that came up as a president held in high regard. It would go in a lot of different directions, I'm certain. And those names are notable indeed, for obvious reasons why they would stand out. So if you were going to share with them something of the greatness of Jesus that makes him, head over heels, way, way, way beyond even those that would be on their list of great people, what would you possibly introduce into your discussion or presentation to them? What would you want them to know about Jesus that, whether it is Mother Teresa or Mahatma Gandhi or Abraham Lincoln or anybody else in high regard, they can't possibly measure up? What would you want to try to prove to them that makes Jesus unique next to them? Anybody? Oh, he's not any different than any of them. He can't stand the ground next. What would you want to try to prove or demonstrate? There's one you want to get to at some particular point of importance, isn't it? That the others may have demonstrated high character traits, whether of morality or self-sacrifice and servanthood, putting other people's lives ahead of themselves, a higher calling. Jesus took that one notch up when he not only put others before himself, but provided for them what just modeling could never provide. When he took upon himself on the cross the payment for our sin and paid that price for us that only he could pay. Sin has been conquered, so we want to get to that. Okay, anything else you can think of you'd want to prove? That you want to be able, and that isn't that true in all of Scripture? The Apostle Paul making that argument, Jesus making that argument of himself, the apostles making that argument of Jesus. And even in this letter, we've already seen the very first words of the letter that introduce his argument to Jewish readers is to prove that Jesus is not man. He is absolutely God in human form. Through God, he created the world, the one who's eternal, who's always been. So that becomes an important feature. You want to prove and demonstrate he's not just a man, but he is the eternal God who came in human flesh. So that's important. And his death and anything else you want to try to prove? Unconditional love, certainly demonstrated on the cross. The resurrection would separate him from the others. As great as they are, from Gandhi to Mother Teresa to Abraham Lincoln to anybody else you want to call to, there are graves that mark them. They lived, and they ultimately, no matter how sacrificial their lives were, they died, and their remains are in the grave. When it comes to Jesus, he really is separated from all the rest, isn't he? The empty tomb. The resurrection becomes a significant point of proof, and there's lots of arguments, we've done that in the past, to make highly likely or difficult to dispute historically, biblically, the account of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. And so those are some of the things we'll want to be out there to be able to prove. Now, we'll come back to that thought maybe in a few minutes, but go back, travel with me 2,000 years now to the early time here, the early church, when you've got a whole different world, a different culture, and a different response pattern going on. Jews who are first shared the gospel in and around Jerusalem and Judea, a great response initially, and over the course of years as the gospel spread to the entire Roman world, persecution to believers began to intensify, didn't it? Especially Jewish believers. It really got tougher and tougher and tougher. The Romans increased the pressure. They were a little uncomfortable with these Jews who were growing in large numbers, very fervent, talking about another God. Remember, you're talking about emperor worship. It's the emperor who's God. Now you're talking about Jesus. This is way too much of a threat for the Romans, getting increasingly uncomfortable. The Jewish religious leaders were intensifying their opposition against Jewish believers because they were following no longer the codes of the Pharisees, the law of Moses, but following this whole new sect. And so all this stuff's going on. And man, it really is getting tough. We looked at chapter 10, verses 32 to 34, that describes some of the things that were going on back then. I mean, homes were being destroyed, homes were burned down, believers were being marched off into prison, kids are without parents, wives are without husbands. I mean, it is getting brutal, on top of the fact that even within the Jewish community, if you were marking yourself as a follower of Jesus, you were ostracized. If you offered a product, they wouldn't buy it. If you offered a service, they wouldn't utilize you. You were mocked, you were ostracized from the community, your kids were as well. It was getting difficult to survive. So much so that they began to retreat, going back to many of the old covenant practices, re-identifying and acclimating themselves with the synagogue, no longer associating themselves with believers in Jesus. And now the author's writing with great passion and concern, not even sure who's out there. Who has believed, who's retreated? Who was close to believing but never crossed that line and made a profession of faith in Jesus? Who had rejected? It was really difficult to see who's who as he's writing this particular letter. So as he's trying to convince his readers and listeners that Jesus is greater than any other, he's making a theological presentation first of Jesus being the greatest of God's spiritual beings, greater than the angels. A detailed presentation, we noted that because way up here are the angels in Jewish thought, a little bit distorted. They had kind of the angels, like God's 1A and angels are 1B, and they had it way too high up on the totem pole. And he's presenting a theology to show that Jesus is greater than even the angels. He created the angels. They serve him. He's king. They serve the king. And so that argument kind of takes its path through 2 chapters. Having demonstrated that Jesus is greater than God's created spirit beings, he's now going to set out to prove that Jesus is greater than all of God's human beings. Having proven that Jesus is greater than God's heavenly representatives, he's now going to prove that Jesus is greater than God's human representatives. If he's going to prove that he's greater than angels who came to serve men, he's now going to prove that Jesus is greater than the greatest of human instruments who came to serve God. So if he's going to do that in a Jewish mindset and choose one personality from Jewish history that would be right up at the top of the list that Jews revered more than any other, to prove his point of the greatness, the superiority, the grandeur of Jesus, who else would you choose other than Moses? I mean, there are lots of great names, like we had lots of great names. You could say Abraham, and other books use Abraham as well. But my goodness, if you're going to set somebody up at the top to be able to compare and contrast Jesus with, You can't get better than Moses. So here's his logical argument, right? If he's going to make this proof stand and move these people out of their lethargy, out of their apathy, out of their self-preservation mode, if you're going to set him apart in a way that will force them to a life-transforming decision, then Moses is a good one to choose. Just think about Moses' resume. I mean, listen, in this culture, in this video-driven culture, if you were going to transpose our video culture back 2,000 years, you'd have to post Moses' resume moments on YouTube. And can you imagine the scenes that you'd have to play out to try to prove the great stuff that Moses did? What an impressive resume. I mean, how are you going to put a YouTube video up of what Moses did when he led the people of Israel out of bondage? You know, it'd be a pretty long video, go on for days, of them leaving Egypt. But I guess maybe the short version, because we're the Sesame Street generation, have been for too long. Kids don't want to sit and see something too long unless it's a movie, that keeps action moving about every 30 seconds, and you just turn little Sesame Street tidbits into a 2-hour movie. They can handle that. But if you're going to summarize the great moment of Moses, what are some of the moments you'd want to show up on YouTube of Moses' actions? Where do you want to start with? Where are you going to go, Kim? Hi, Kim. How are you, Kim? Nice to see you. Where are you going to choose? What's the first moment you want to show up on the screen? Maybe you want to see the burning bush. That'd be pretty cool. Yeah. Can you imagine that one there? You're seeing from behind. There's a video of this bush that's burning, flames, and not consuming. And Moses starts, take your sandals off, and that whole, you want to see that? That's pretty cool. What's another one you want to see? Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna put in one few-minute snippet, the redemption of Israel, I can kind of picture the scene from a helicopter or something like that, camera being taken. So you're getting this kind of scan of what looks like, a mass, maybe hundreds of thousands of people kind of gathering, and you see the Red Sea, and you see Moses kind of standing out at the edge. And can you see, you're probably looking from behind. Imagine you're up a little bit in the helicopter where the camera is. Can you see that? And Moses takes his staff and lifts it up. And what happens? What are you going to see? Whoa. What a rush. I mean, that's kids, right? You're going to see the waters parting. Whoa, what's that, man? And the parting as far as you can see, and nuts. And then the camera's going to zoom in on the ground. Why is it going to zoom in on the ground? It's dry. It's not even wet. Riverbed. It's dry. That happened. Whoa. And then all of a sudden you're going to see, the process begin of the marching, and it may be toward that. You're going to see that one, aren't you? That's a pretty cool resume. Well, what else would you want to see that makes Moses' resume pretty significant? You want to see the water coming out of the rock. Some of the miracles when they're in the wilderness. Yeah, how did he do that? Strikes the rock and the water come out. And other times when he gave them fresh water out of bitter water and manna. I want to see the video of the manna. That'd be like the cool, what did they eat? The quail that was there. You want to see that kind of stuff going on. Yeah, that's a cool resume. Moses kind of pulling all this stuff off. Pretty neat. What else you want to see? I want to see a couple other things if I'm hitting the video spot on YouTube. You want to see Moses right on the bulletin cover, guys, right? Remember the cover? There's the cloud. You want to see him up there on the mountain? I want to see what happens when God and Moses are having that conversation. Remember that? God's talking to Moses, spooky fireworks and lightning and thunder, and God speaking to Moses, you can't see me. I want to see you. And no, you can't. You see me, and you're gonna fry, and so you're gonna turn around and in the crevice, and I can't imagine what that would have been like for the glory of God to pass by Exodus chapter 32 and chapter 33, and you want to see that, and remember what it says in Exodus chapter 30. Turn back to Exodus 34 verse 9. What does it say? What does it say happened to Moses? I think that's the one. Exodus chapter 34, verse 29. Yeah. Exodus 34, 29. You see that one? It came about when Moses was coming down from Mount Sinai. The 2 tablets of the testimony were in Moses' hand. as he was coming down from the mountain, that Moses didn't know that the skin of his face shone because he had been speaking to God. And so Moses got this glow. I want to see that on YouTube. No, you want to see that? You want to see him shining as they come down? Whoa! What happened? This guy's got radiation. You can just picture that, can't you? Yeah. You want to see all that stuff. What a resume. Kim's thinking I've lost it. Yeah. I'm out of it, aren't I? So, yeah, those are some of the things you want. What a resume this guy brings to the table of greatness. Someone who evidenced the extraordinary, miraculous powers of God. Of stuff that he did, events he was involved in, not to speak of the fact that, look what he gave to the Israelites. And he comes down with the Ten Commandments engraved in stone. That's not small stuff. Everybody knows about Ten Commandments. They hear about it from the time they're a kid. They may have no idea that it comes from Moses or the Jews or the Bible. No clue at all. Most people in our secular country have no idea that most of what Moses penned in the 5 books, and by the way, that's another pretty impressive feat to your resume. I mean, 5 huge books of the Bible he wrote. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, 5 books, Pentateuch, 5, Penta 5. And yeah, the law, the holy law, he's the author of it, penned all that stuff down. What did he give to Israel? Not the 10 Commandments. Most people don't know that our penal code, our system of jurisprudence and law, I want to talk about it, separation of church and state. Yeah, sure. I want to talk about the fact that much of our legal system, and for that matter, much of the legal system of our sisters in Europe, were built upon the principles that are there in the codes of the Old Covenant, identifying what's right, what's wrong, what's moral, what's immoral, what's legal, what's not legal. We didn't invent it. It came from our ancestors, and it came from, and it came from, and it came from, and it goes back to much of the premise of what you find right in the Bible. Moses not only gives the 10 Commandments, but he gives all the civil law, how people treat each other in a government, in a country. Right out of there, Moses gives them that. Big stuff, big resume. Gives them the whole ceremonial law, all about what made Israel unique as a theocracy. God was their ultimate king, and so worship times and seasons, that's all there, and the customs of worship. And then the biggest maybe of all, he gives them the tabernacle. 5 chapters in Exodus 25 to 30, on the tabernacle, building it, setting it up, purpose, priesthood, who the priests are, where they come from, what they do. Talk about detail and organization. I mean, what a resume this guy brings to the table. It's impressive, isn't it? Man, if you're going to prove that Jesus is great, why not go to old Mo? He's someone who's fairly impressive, and the Jews held him in the highest of esteem. So to make his argument and establish this truth, in chapter 3, as he introduces this point, chapter 3 and verse 1, "Therefore, holy brethren, partakers of a heavenly calling, consider Jesus, who's the apostle and high priest of our confession." He introduces his argument of Jesus being greater than Moses with a call and a summoning to those out there, especially in the audience, those who had really believed in Jesus. It almost seems like, while his argument may be broad at the beginning, almost sounds like right now at the immediate, these particular words are especially directed toward those Jews who had placed their faith in Jesus as Savior and Messiah, but it was just getting too hot to be out front. So to you guys, I want to talk to you. You're pulling back. You're retreating. You're ditching. I don't know about you, but I notice in our culture that I see it in families, parenting, I see it in our academic institutions. You know, there seems to be extreme reactions that we take when addressing those who aren't mustered up. Now, on the one hand, sometimes we just basically say, I can't fight this. You want to be a slackard and fail, whatever. Be a slackard and fail. You want to be a royal mess up, be a royal mess up. I just quit. And you get a lot of families who have just surrendered to the kids. You know what I mean? See it around? No standards, no expectations, no consequences, nothing for behavior, nothing for conduct, nothing for respect, nothing when it comes to initiative or personal disciplines or striving for excellence. It's like, life is too hard, I don't care. I just quit. And so you have kids who run the ship. And that's it. They just do whatever they want to do. So there's no accountability. And then sometimes you go to the other end of the spectrum and you get parents, who treat the kids, or maybe those in other institutions, they have the whip out. The kids misstep and you're going to start slugging them around. You idiot, you fool. And verbally will do it, or physically will do it, and just go into tirades. And verbally browbeat and beat down the kids. You know what I'm talking about? You're a loser, you're a failure, you're no good, you can't do anything right, you're a royal screw-up, give you one task, you can't even do that right, what the? And it just comes, phew. Anybody know what I'm talking about there? Sometimes the tendency is we are just so hard on those who are struggling. We seem to have a difficult time finding a proper place of balance. I'm struck here that as, you're probably wondering where I'm going, I'm struck here that as he begins this argument, seeing what he is seeing of so many of them who had literally acted as if they were betraying Jesus. Do you believe, like Peter, when they were taking him to be beaten, aren't you one of it? Not me. He is responding with the same heart as Jesus did to Peter a little bit later. No stick, no stones, no whip, no lambasting, no name-calling, no berating, no tearing down. Jesus to Peter, it's like, hey, Pete, do you love me? Whew. With what he pulled off, hey, Pete, come on, let's talk. I know what you've done. Not like you can hide. You can't say I didn't do it. We all know it. Come on. Let's talk this one through, huh? That same heart of Jesus to Peter is what I see in the opening words he chooses to use to describe his audience, many of whom had already committed mutiny. They had already turned their backs and walked away. Have you ever been there? Turn your back and walk away. Just give it up. Instead of him taking out stones, sticks and stones, verbal stones, instead of berating and tearing them down, you slackard and screw up. Look at the first words. It struck me, maybe not you, but I'm going through this and I'm thinking, whoa, this is kind of interesting. First words identifying them. Holy brethren, partakers of a heavenly calling. I find that rather interesting. Two titles that he uses to describe this audience, most of whom had retreated. Hey guys, come on, let's talk this one through. Look at what you have been made and declared by the Jesus that you're walking away from. The Bible says that when we believe in Jesus, he's not ashamed to call us his brethren. Hey guys, you are my brothers and sisters. If you've believed in Jesus, we're already part of one family. And because we're family, I ain't neglecting you. I'm not abandoning you. I'm not throwing my hands up in the air and say, you do what you want to do. I'm going here, you're going there, go there. No. Family hangs together, and family cares about each other, and family's not going to simply sit by idly and accept when others in the family are ditching and pulling away, because you matter as family. You're my brethren. You may not be acting like it. You may not be thinking like it. You may not be choosing like it. You may not be speaking like it. You may not be relating like it because you've chosen to turn your back against us. I mean, tell me, a lot of you have been in churches and with families, and you've had people within the church maybe who do something, say something, act away, turn their back, walk away. You want, bye. You going that way? Fine, go. I don't care. That's not this guy. That's not where the Father is. Prodigal son's a reminder of that same heart of God who runs after those who abandon. Not just let them go. Hey, you're my family. Not only are you my family as my brother, but you are part of the holy brethren. Now be careful here. He's not using the word holy to speak of the fact that they were pure in their walk. The word holy is the same Greek root word that's sometimes translated saint or sanctified or set apart one, and that's his emphasis. What he's saying is you were part of a set apart family. You've been set apart from your sin when you believed in Jesus and God forgave you and came to indwell you. He set you apart from those who were lost and brought you into light. You are a set apart one. You are a one who's been set apart, sanctified in the sense that now you're in God's family. You're a set apart one. You're not part of any family. You're part of our family, His family. You're a set apart one. If you've been set apart from that, why do you want to retreat to it when you already know the difference? You've been set apart from the old ways. I mean, the old stuff you did all your life that we did too. All the old sacrifices over and over again. And all the ceremonial worship stuff that's in that law over and over again. Why do you want to go back to that laborious, religious duty of obligations that we've already discovered can't do anything to make us pure? It's just, it's like a rechargeable battery. You got to keep plugging it back in again because it just dies out. Why do you want to go back there? Come on. We've already been set apart to someone and something so much greater, so much better, so much more freeing. We're part of a set apart family. Wow. Why do you think he's beginning there? Because if he's going to appeal to them, he's going to do it from the positive, not from the negative. Look at where you have been in Jesus already. Isn't that where we want to keep going? Don't you want to keep moving in that direction where God's placed you and planted you instead of going all back there? Why do you want to live in the mud when God's already cleaned you from it? Why do you want to make life harder when God's freed you from all that bondage? Why do you want to go backwards? That's kind of like Corky. This is where you already are. He doesn't have to berate them, beat them, slug them, attack them, name call. Doesn't have to do that. Just remind them of who they already are in Jesus. And suddenly, if their focus is there, and it's kind of like reorienting thinking. It's like, what in the world am I doing here? I must be nuts. I like that one. That's where I used to be. Back on the road. Holy brethren. That's a positive appeal, isn't it? And then what comes with it? Not only holy brethren, but partakers of a heavenly calling. Love that. We're not only part of a new earthly family, we're part of a new heavenly family. We're not just part of a nation of people, we're part of a heavenly home. And this book is filled with these kinds of statements. In chapter 11 and verse 16, when he's in that hall of fame of the faithful, in chapter 11 and verse 16, he's making a general statement of those Jews early on in history who had placed their faith in God. And look at chapter 11, verse 16. As it is, these who believed, who suffered greatly, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. God has for them a better country, a heavenly one. And that's what he's reminding them of who we are when we believe in Jesus. We're part of a heavenly family. Or chapter 12 and verse 22. Here's another way he does it. Chapter 12, verse 22. Here's again the contrast of language. 12:22, you see it? You've come to Mount Zion. As soon as you think about Mount Zion, you think of Moses, huh? But this is a different Mount Zion he's talking about, a heavenly Mount Zion. You've come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to myriads of angels. See the contrast? This is who you really are. This is the family you've really joined now. You're in a heavenly accompaniment. In the book of Philippians, chapter 3, verse 20, Paul says it in these words. He said, when you believe in Jesus and he cleanses you of sin, you're now citizens of heaven. No longer citizens here. That's why Paul will challenge us in Colossians chapter 3 and verse 2. He said, set your affection on things above, not things below. Set your mind on things. Why? Because of who we are when we believe in Jesus. His appeal is not going to be by beating them down, reminding them of their failures, of stupid choices. He's not going there. He's just reminding them, if they've really believed, of who they actually are. Kind of reorienting to the goal of where I'm supposed to be headed. Because whether it's them or you or me, when we get sidetracked, we are literally sidetracked. We're off course, right? And when you're off course, you're not running the right race and you're not looking at the right finishing line. You've really gotten off, and some of us get off road and we get lost out there in the wilderness somewhere. But he can give us the heavenly GPS to kind of get us back to where we need to be. And it just starts by where he's beginning. I love these words. Hey, listen, you got not only a new earthly family, you got a new heavenly family. You got not only a new earthly purpose, you have a new heavenly purpose. You are part of the holy brethren and partakers of a heavenly calling. So with that reorientation of thinking, identifying his audience, his words are real simple in the middle of verse 1. See why we're not getting any further than verse 1? Look at his... It's really only two words. His challenge to them in the midst of where they're at. In my translation, just two words are here. Can you see the two-word challenge? Consider Jesus. It's an interesting choice of words. He's saying, listen, the Greek word katanoe is just stop for a second. He's saying, just think about this for a second. And just for 1 minute, would you guys do me a favor? He's saying, just give your attention completely, just for a minute. Just think about Jesus. Just him. Just stop with all the other stuff. Just stop. Stop. Time out. Just think. Just pause and let your gaze and your thoughts just fix on him. Time out, quiet time. Just think about him. Just fix, time. No time for ADHD stuff here. No time for displacement stuff. No time for, finding all these other reasons to think about something else. Let's stop the nonsense. Come on. Just stop for a second. None of this. Just think about him. Just think about what have you already learned about him? Just think about him. And then put it all together. Just calculate all this stuff, add it all up, and just think with me. Just think about him. Now, he could, if he wanted to, he could have at this point gone on to a 10-page theology of Jesus. He doesn't do it here. He's actually going to do that through the rest of the letter. But as an attention getter, He only has two things to say about Jesus right here to these guys. That's it. It's really a summary of the whole book. And at this point, in order to capture their attention for this part of the argument, he didn't need a whole lot more than this. He'll be milking this in a lot of detail to fill up the next 10 chapters. But for this moment as an attention getter, if they're going to just think for a second, two things he wanted them to know. What interesting statements are made. You see the two statements that describe Jesus? The first statement says he is what? The apostle. That's a strange word to describe Jesus. It really, you don't find any place else. When you think of apostle, who do you think of? What do you think of? Especially the first generation, the ones that Jesus separated, the guys that he trained, that were part of his core group, the original 12, and of course Judas really wasn't. He's gone. Matthias replaces him, and you have Paul, who meets the definition of apostleship because he's uniquely trained by Jesus, has 14 years at Jesus Desert Bible Institute, and you have all the years, and so you have Paul meeting a unique, but apostles were the word means called out ones. That's what it means. An apostle are the sent ones, really. The sent ones. Literally the sent ones. Those called out by Jesus, trained by Jesus, dispatched by Jesus. They're the ones that he personally sent out and trained. And they're gone, sent ones. And so they meet the initial description and definition of those that Jesus trained. And we can, by application, we talk about missionaries kind of being the application of that, but not by Jesus directly. We're involved in discipling and training and sending, but the core group initially is just that small group that Jesus personally worked with. Now, in an Old Testament sense, even though you don't see the word in the Old Testament, in some broader sense, in an Old Testament sense, Moses kind of would have met that definition back then, wouldn't he? I mean, you talk about somebody who was set apart by God, called by God. You mentioned the YouTube site at the Burning Bush, right? Moses called out by God. Moses is trained and equipped by God, right? Here's the staff, throw it on the ground, turns into a snake, pick it back up. All the training, the miraculous stuff. Moses given the law, given revelation, communicating it, deliver. Moses meets the definition of apostle, kind of Old Testament version. He was literally a called one, trained one, sent one, right? Sent, went, delivered, redeemed. I mean, he just meets the definition. Just as Moses was a sent one in that sense, Old Covenant style, Jesus in its broader sense, greater sense, is also the sent one. He is the Father's sent one, right? John 3:16, God so loved the world, he gave, sent. Yeah. Jesus is heaven's sent. You can spell it both ways. He is heaven sent. It literally came from heaven, takes on a human body. He is God's sent one. Hebrews chapter 10, he even uses that very language to describe himself. In Hebrews chapter 10, starting at verse 5, this is attributed to Jesus, quoting from the Old Testament in the 40th Psalm. In Hebrews 10, verse 5, therefore when he, Jesus, comes into the world, Jesus said this. So apparently this is a psalm that Jesus spoke when he is about to be born of Mary in Bethlehem. You see it there in verse 5? Sacrifice and offering you have not desired, but a body you have prepared for me. In whole burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you've never taken pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come. In the roll of the book it's written of me, I've come to do thy will. He's the sent one. He came to do the Father's will. The ultimate sent one is Jesus. He's the ultimate apostle, sent to deliver redemption, to not just speak it, but to provide it, to not just provide it, to become it. He's the ultimate apostle, delivering hope and redemption. So back to Hebrews chapter 3, verse 1, he's the sent one of the Father. The reason why you need to just stop for a second, think about what you're doing, is to remember who He is. He is the Father's ultimate sent one. You think Moses was a sent one? Can he even hold a candle to who Jesus is and what He did? Moses brought a message. Jesus became the message. Moses brought a message about God. Jesus is God who brings God's message. Moses provided a path for redemption. Jesus became the path for redemption. Moses talked about others offering a lamb. Jesus came to be the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. I mean, if you think Moses is an apostle sent one, then what do you think about Jesus? Would you just think about it for a minute? Why are you going backwards? He's the apostle and what does it say there in verse 3, the end of the verse? High priest. Hebrew word Kohen. By the way, any Jewish people you've ever known with the name Cohen, C-O-H-E-N, comes from the Hebrew word Kohen, which means priest. So it may well be, back there in their lineage, they may have came from a Levitical family. It's possible. I don't know where the name would come from. Some of them are Levi, Levites. Some of these common Jewish names, Levi, or Levinson, or Cohen, those are all kind of priestly terms. It may be a hint of their identity. Don't know. Could have been named for it for some reason in Europe, but it's an interesting thought. But here is Jesus. He came not only to be the sent one, He came to be the provider, the priest, man's representative before God. If Moses represented man before God when he prayed, Jesus represents us before God by taking upon flesh. Chapter 2 of Hebrews, verse 17, it's already been there, remember it? Back in chapter 2, verse 17, He had to be made like us in all things, that He might become a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God to make propitiation for the sins of the people. So here it is. He's just introducing Jesus. As an apostle, He is God's representative among man. As a priest, He is man's representative before God. So His argument is very simply this. You retreating? Look who you are. Look at what He's made you. Just stop for a second and think about who He is. Why do you want to abandon Him? Why do you want to retreat? Why do you want to go backwards? Look at who He is. Well, you've already been introduced to the ultimate sent one who brought you the indwelling presence of God in your life. You've already been introduced to the great priest who provided for you a forgiveness that you'll never find going backwards and all that stuff. So that might be His argument to you and to me this morning as we come to the elements of the Lord's table. It may well be that God's asking you the same question 2,000 years later for a different reason. God might be asking you, what are you retreating to? Where are you going? Where are you headed? What course you on? What decisions you're making? What priorities are you investing in? Where are you going with your life? I heard a conversation over the course of the week, people you don't know, and kind of talking about just Christian stuff, I guess, and family stuff, and just general, kind of generic conversation that you often hear, and the usual wishes, hope you have, hope things are good for you and going well for you and have a good, kind of the normal verbiage we use, right? Hope you have a good life and that kind of thing. Is that what it's all about for us? Just what it's about for anybody else? Just have a good life, just enjoy yourself, is that all it is? Maybe we need to kind of just pull off the side of the road and consider Jesus. Because He came not just to give us, a good time, good life, have fun, enjoy yourself. He came to revolutionize life, didn't He? Make it radically different. Are we discovering and enjoying a radically different life? These elements tell us why that should be our experience. Let's pray together. Lord, as we come to your table with gratefulness, and remember what you've accomplished for us. We take a moment to come alongside and just to think about who Jesus is. Amazed that we would be part of a separated family, that you would consider us as part of those who have a heavenly purpose and a heavenly calling. We're amazed that Jesus would be your representative to us, that he would be our representative before you, that he would provide for us something so great we could never accomplish on our own. We thank you as we come to this table, and to you in Jesus' name.